Hey friends, this is Mark Suroviec, host of the Workplace Solutions podcast, inviting you to discover the joy of work. I am here for part 2 of our talk with Iggy Perillo, boss and founder at WSL Leadership, talking about difficult people. Do you have other stories of appropriately dealing with garbage behavior? Or failures.
I think there's the sort of bigger issue in some organizations. I'm actually working with an organization now, helping them change how they deal with conflict internally. And conflict is often another name for garbage behavior that we just have tolerated, or that we swept under the rug, or we didn't deal with, or miscommunication. If we have behavior that's not appropriate, whatever, in our environment, and we don't deal with it, it can feel like conflict. Oh, they keep doing that thing. They keep doing that thing. Like, oh my gosh, now I have to do this thing. Ugh. They keep saying words that are offensive to me. Now we're fighting because what they're saying is offensive. I'm offended. We're in conflict. We need to duke it out, which is taking far too many steps in the direction of aggression is not the answer, people. You can do other things. But I think in that bigger context of the behavior they don't want to see has been tolerated within the organization for a while. Like, there's just been things that have been happening and people are like, well, I don't know. We don't really have a good way to deal with it. We don't want to punish people for showing up late. We don't want to punish people for sort of, portraying values that don't align with our organization. We don't want to punish people for making sort of gossipy, backstabby choices. And so because they didn't want to punish people, all this behavior just built up and built up and built up. So they have this culture based on backstabby, sort of negativity. Squeaky wheel gets all the attention and everyone else gets left in the dust. Behaviors within that organization that were not conducive to the organization flourishing collectively. I'm a big fan of this whole concept and framework of restorative justice, where suddenly we have to bring people up and talk about not just their behavior, but the harm that their behavior is causing, which means someone, somehow, somewhere in the system is being harmed by this behavior. Back to my buddy and her showing up late 3 days in a row. I'm being harmed, but also our work is being harmed. Harm is done to me as a human because I'm stressed and anxious and tense and rushing to do more work because I'm doing a half hour more work every day because she rolls in a half hour later. But I think the harm to the organization is maybe the organization doesn't look well. Maybe people don't want to join our organization, whatever it is. We're not as productive. We're not as creative. Depending on the outcomes, we're not doing as well as an organization. So looking at how this conflict needs to be resolved and how to engage with people means looking at behavior, looking at what is actually the outcome of that behavior. What's the harm being caused? There's a sort of classic line for many Outward Bound courses when I'd have teenagers, these are teenager examples, who would speak a certain way. And they're like, oh, that's just how I talk at home. And someone else is like, whoa, those words I would get my mouth washed out with soap if I was home and I said, whatever it is. There's, it could be cussing. It could be terms that some people view as derogatory and other people view as common conversation. There's just a lot of things around conversation and vocabulary that we use that does not land the same in every population or with every group or with every person, right? So to say, cool, we're in conflict, you use words that don't work for me, but we're trying to build a culture that's inclusive and that's supportive of all people. And some of your word choices are really damaging the culture we're creating. Cool, we have a conflict around this. Let's talk about what's happening and what are the results. Who's being harmed by this? What is being harmed by this? And then we can have a much richer conversation around, well, what is that goal we want to do? We want to be a thriving team together. Great. This behavior specifically is harming our thriving team. Do we want to change it? Do you want to do something else? Do we change what we expect from our team? What do we really want to have happen here? And engaging in those conversations with an eye toward repairing harm, which is sort of the tenet of restorative justice I really like. How do we fix the harm that may have been caused? But also, how do we set things up so this harm is not repeated and caused? Or wait, do we need to readjust our expectations? Were our expectations even in line with the reality? Am I expecting 14-year-olds to master their vocabulary 24 hours a day? No, that's ridiculous. That's not going to happen. That's not a thing. But you can see this as 14-year-olds in their vocabulary is one thing, but at an office, at a workplace, gossip or backstabbing could be seen as a very analogous type of issue. Do we want to have gossip really decide who gets promoted and who doesn't get promoted in our organization? Do we want a culture where if you step out of line, something's going to happen to you. You're going to be punished, but not maybe by the organization, but by the people around you. How do we want this organization to feel, act, look moving forward? And those conversations, I think, are much richer once you approach them from looking at behavior and harm and goals and process and where you want to be as a group down the line.
So, Iggy, let's move on to this idea of emotionally intelligent conflict. Help us understand what that is and what that looks like.
For sure. Some would say emotional intelligence is this huge, amorphous, a little bit concept, but some folks define it down to 5 key pieces: being self-aware, being self-regulating, being empathetic, but cognitive empathy. So I can understand how you're feeling. Reading feelings in other people's is what empathy means in that situation, versus I feel with you is a different type of empathy. So we're talking cognitive empathy. Having internal motivation, and then this beautiful, like, messy bubble called social skills, right? Which is how we talk, how we interact, how we have conflict, how we do everything around us, how we interact with other people, how we communicate, everything. So we have this like beautiful catch-all, which of social skills. So if you want to bring emotional intelligence to conflict, there's this part where being aware of the emotional state you bring is so important. I'm sure we've all had a situation happen where we're just steaming. We feel so frustrated, so angry, so agitated, having lots of words. Brené Brown, by the way, just wrote this beautiful book called Atlas of the Heart, or just was recently published, and it defines different emotions and how they're different, how she sees them in research and how people express them. So it's important to be able to name our emotions and understand that as part of self-awareness. I can name and understand my emotional state beyond happy, sad, and angry, which are the sort of classic we default to. There are many more nuances in there. But I think we've all been to a situation where something happens, we're angry, we're frustrated, we're pissed, we're agitated to a state and tense that we just blow up or yell or scream or do something we didn't really, our more calm, conscious self would not have done, or something we regret later, or something that doesn't, like, later on reflection, we're like, yeah, that was not me at my best, right? I was acting through emotional agitation versus trying to build connection. So going into conflict with emotional intelligence means being aware of your emotional state, right? Am I amped? Am I amped in a good way? Am I like really so frustrated that everything you say, I'm going to already assume is going to be terrible. So I'm just going to plow through and bully you into agreeing with me. So being emotionally aware going in, we felt this before. We've felt this as humans, I think, just interacting with humans in our lives around us. Another part of being emotionally intelligent conflict is that piece of empathy, right? Cognitive empathy, understanding how the other person is feeling. Like, I think we see sometimes in conflict, we read the other person as being defiant, or we read them as being arrogant, or we read them as being like haughty. And we then react to that defensively. So we're trying to address something. We read the other person as being defensive or some host of defensive behaviors, and then we get defensive about them being defensive, so then we're more agitated, and so then you see a sort of escalation again of emotion, which doesn't always work out well. But understanding their emotional state means that's part of those things around asking questions, like, what is actually happening for you? It looks like you're really upset by this. It looks like you're really sad right now. I can ask these questions, and then the other person can clarify, like, oh, I'm not sad or upset. I'm just really bummed that my dog is sick and it's weighing on me and blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. Now I can build this more connection and more understanding by being empathetic and making sure I'm correct in my understanding of other people's emotions. I'm sure we've all also met someone that is out there and you're like, did you not catch those cues that this person is having a bad day? Or did you miss it? Have you seen, oh no, I'm not going to have the right movie reference, but the boss that Office Space, right? He comes in and he's like, well, okay, I'm going to need you to stay late tonight. Thanks. All right. See ya. And he's like out of there. The guy's like, oh my God. He's so frustrated. But the boss just like, well, it's a movie. It's like a caricature. But I think we see that we have the stereotype of the person who doesn't recognize what the havoc they're causing around them, or doesn't relate, or doesn't understand the emotions of them. I think we see this in people leaving their workplaces now, the resignation that are happening, but the shifts to different space and different work, because they don't feel seen or heard or valued by the people around them, by their manager, their boss, whoever. And some of that is a sense of empathy. Like, they don't understand how I feel. Yeah. By not understanding how you feel, people seem to sort of negate part of who you are as a person. And you want to feel like a person at work. You don't want to be like, okay, I'm a machine for 8 hours a day. Then I can go home and be a person. Then I can live my life. Cool. I think that balance is not working for people these days. Like they don't want to be a machine for 8 hours a day.
Yeah. There are people that choose that, and it doesn't usually turn out as well as other options. So
yeah. And some people that suits them and they're great, cool. Most people that does not. Yeah. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel fulfilling. They leave. They're going to leave that position, that work often if they can. When you address conflict by being self-aware, being able to understand the other person, and then this next layer is looking at, well, what is the other person, what is the behavior, why are they doing this thing? What need are they trying to meet with this behavior? Suddenly you open up so much more conversation. You now know how someone feels. We can talk about the same behavior. Oh, you showed up late 3 days in a row. But now we can have this conversation that's very different than one where, how do I force you to show up on time, right? Like that could be one approach to this conversation. I know how I'm feeling about it. I know actually now more about how you're feeling about it. And now we can talk about what needs you're trying to meet through this behavior. Like, oh, you have other priorities that take precedence over showing up to work on time. Great, weird, interesting, good to know. How do we work with this? How do we make these things work together versus put them in conflict? Oh, your priorities and our work priorities conflict. By the way, welcome to life, right? You know, so many people would rather spend their time doing other things often than the work tasks that they are given. So how do we make these things fit together? How can we work together in a way that meets our needs? And so that approach to conflict brings in the other person, their needs, their desires, what is going on for them, their feelings. It makes it just so much more nuanced of a conversation than you showed up late 3 times. I'm going to put a note in your file. Okay, whatever. Weird.
Yeah, and if you're a colleague, you can't put a note in anyone's file.
No, I'm just going to, well, but here's what colleagues do in a different way. I'm going to talk to everyone else about how you're a terrible colleague and put a note in your social file that you're a jerk, right? Like I'm going to gossip about you behind your back and say, oh my gosh, can you believe it? This coworker doesn't care about anyone. They're so selfish. Ooh, that's a note in your social file a little bit. That's flexing some social power that can affect people. And in the same way that a note in your file, whatever even that means, can affect promotion, can affect growth, can affect opportunities that are presented to someone.
Is it all right if I borrow that idea of a social file? I find that fascinating.
Yeah, I just came up with it right now. It's spontaneous, so have it.
Well, I like it. That's because what you're describing is 100% real. Without going on too big of a rabbit trail, you mentioned the Great Resignation. Thoughts on that? Yeah.
The Great Resignation is a failure of leadership. End of story. That is the number one problem. Poor leaders in so many different places, so entrenched with so many systems that don't serve people in a way that's emotionally intelligent at the bare minimum, but doesn't serve people in a way that is fulfilling or thriving. People are going to leave if they can. In the world of social media, I saw a post from one who runs a software company and said, yeah, when I hear a company says they're going to move back to in-person work, that's where I send all my recruiters, because I know half of that staff doesn't want to return back to in-person work. So they're easy for me to recruit. It must have been a more virtual-based organization space because they know people are unhappy with that situation. And that tension, in-person work, that's come up with many themes. It's been a theme in many conversations I've had recently, and it's very stressful for folks. Someone the other day was telling me about their son who has a 2-year-old who can't get vaccinated, as the parent doesn't want to get sick, right? Plus, they have to care for a kid. So if you're sick, you have to care for a kid. A kid's sick, there's a lot of complications that could happen. Her son's organization was like, cool, we're coming back to work in person. We just built $1 million campus. And the son is like, ugh, like dreading it. I could just hear from her the stress in her son's life now around this space and having a job, but really valuing like the literal health and safety of his family against a job. So those stressful times, I mean, these are pieces of conflict and pieces of stress in people's lives. And I mean, that's just one teeny example of why people are leaving so many different places and organizations. And if they can, and there are people who can't leave. And this is the other part too. The people who are left behind are sometimes the folks that get more and more dumped on them or have more and more expectations. And I think more of those folks are having a voice around like, yeah, people are leaving. Let's make some changes. Not everyone has the freedom or the capacity to just drop and go to a new place. So I think some of those conversations are happening, hopefully, in more organizations. And the reality is, it's still this long, probably overdue critique of command and control leadership that really doesn't work well.
That's super insightful. I'm so tempted to pursue that rabbit trail for like 30 minutes, but we're going to move on.
Okay. That's our next time. We'll have this side conversation.
Yeah, this is fun. We can definitely do this again. Let's pick some of our fun bonus questions. Tell us of a time you saw transformation in a group of people or a person in some program that you did or a training you were leading.
Oh, my I'll tell you my favorite example because obviously it's my favorites. I was working with a sport team. So the WSL leadership is sport. I work with athletes and athletic teams at times. And this team was very competitive, a very high ranked team about to go to, I think they're about to head to an international tournament, like the international championship, right? So not just a national team, like the next level of competition. And they had a coach who had been ill for a long time and then passed away. So their coach passes away. It's been coming for a long time. You know, it's not a surprise. It's been really emotional. They're very attached to this coach. He was a big part of their team. And the team was devastated. Like the people were so, just a range of reactions, right? And people in their sadness and their grief act in a lot of different ways, as we've seen. Some people want to pretend like it never happened. Like, we're going to just keep going, the same as always. Other people are physically feeling sick, weak, sad. People are crying. People are breaking down. Other people are trying to make other people laugh, and people aren't reading that well. You know, it's just all over the place, right? Like, oh, you're sad. I'm going to lighten the mood by telling some jokes. And someone else is like, that's so mean. You're telling jokes. You know, this is that's a big mess. And they're going to go to this tournament, super competitive tournament. And I got to work with this team a few times. Like the first time was I just let them talk about what was going on for them and how they felt. And I think for whatever reason, who knows? I don't know what happened before I got there. I just know that they were, you know, all over the place by the time I got there. And just letting them listen to each other in a team conversation, I could feel sort of the tension lift a little bit in the room. They're like, oh, you know, it's okay for you to feel sad. It's okay for you to feel like I just need to keep going. It's okay for you to be telling jokes. It's okay for you to be extra quiet right now. All those things are okay. But they had to understand that everyone could recognize how they were feeling, if this makes sense. So they could recognize how they're feeling. They could see how each other were feeling. Some tension is lifting. That's great. And so the next meeting I got to have, I mean, that took, I make it sound like it was a short meeting. It was not a short meeting, right? That was some conversation. Yeah. I met with them again a week or so later, and we just talked about this tournament they're going to. Like, hey, we have to go to this thing. Everyone knows what's going on. Everyone knows that about your coach, you know, he's known in this community of the sport and everything. How are you going to respond in the moment? So you need to be prepared for someone to come up to you and be like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear about your coach. Trying to be nice, whatever. But also, how are you going to take care of your teammates in this space where some people were feeling like they just didn't want any social interaction, right? It's a tournament. There's lots of people. It's a lot of expectations. And other people wanted to leave the team and be in the social space. Some didn't. And it was this really interesting conversation around how to support each other moving through that specific tournament. It was a weekend event. So how are they going to support each other this weekend? And they had such a beautiful, brilliant, like I let them ask for what they could, you know, needed from their teammates, but also share what they could offer to their teammates. So 2 pieces of conversation. One person was like, sometimes I get cornered and I don't know how to get out of a conversation, but I really want to. And someone else chimed in with like, every time I see you cornered in a conversation, I'm going to come up to you and say, hey, I think we have a team meeting right now. And then you can get out of that conversation, right? Like they were so sweet to each other, right? Just trying to support each other through feeling cornered, feeling on time, feeling late, feeling whatever. But they really just wanted to feel together. At the tournament, they wanted a sense of being together. So how are they going to craft that? It ended up, they did very well. They survived their weekend. They did their tournament. I think by understanding each other's feelings and by making actual literal plans to support each other through this event, you know, they could anticipate these different pieces and what was going to happen. I think they actually drew together more as a team, where before they were feeling much more fragmented. And I did not attend the tournament. I watched later, and they did really well. And later, I was walking. This is like the part that makes this whole story sound like a movie, right? So yay, the team is doing better. They came together, like charming music for everyone. I was walking down the street and this car pulls up next to me and the window rolls down and it's one of the players from this team. And she leans out the window and says, thanks so much for those conversations you had with us. It made us feel like you were there on the track with us. I was like, oh my God. But just seeing them in the space, and obviously we're in a private space so they could let their emotions out or do whatever, to seeing them perform together at such a high level, like really like world championship type of level, was amazing. And I think the real shift was their feelings around feeling like we're a team at all, to feeling like yeah, we're actually doing great things together, and we can do this, and we can thrive in this environment, this high pressure environment, even with this really heavy emotional weight on us. So yeah, that worked out really great for me. And I think for the team fundamentally, they got closer and closer through that experience.
That's a great story. We're going to hit my favorite question. It's time to spin the wheel of embarrassing moments. Tell us a story of professional failure where you screwed up, and what did you learn from it?
This is a great question. I knew it was coming, and I feel like I have so many answers, and yet I'm not sure which one to tell you. Like I'm constantly doing things that I'm like, oh no, that was a bad choice. But I recover, learning. I'm a big fan of learning. So looking back at them, and Carol Dweck, again, that growth mindset, working with all the time, trying to pull learning out of train wrecks that I cause. Working for Outward Bound for many years, we co-instruct, right? So there's two of us with a group of students out in the field. And those students could be teenagers, like we mentioned, or adults, or any age of folks. I love working with sort of the college age and older populations. And I think there was apparently I'm reverting to physical comedy for you now. I'm sitting in a canoe in shallow water. Like the student is loading, or the student was going to step into the boat with me, or he stepped on the gunnel. And so our boat is starting to tip over, and our boat is already loaded with some food and gear. It's a big mess if everything falls into the lake and gets all wet. So as the boat's tipping over, I basically like throw myself out of the edge of the boat, but I have my paddle in my hand, like sling my paddle out of my hand as I throw myself off the other edge of the boat so that it doesn't tip over and capsize and just dump all our stuff into the lake. And the paddle, as I threw the paddle, it actually hit my student. So that's like a classic move. And it's not like we're far away, it's not like I like all on like victed at him, but I tried to, it's awkward. I'm flailing out, and then I'm in the water. And it's like a foot deep. It's not very deep at all. We're right on shore, because we were just getting in and finishing loading. And so all that was like ridiculous and embarrassing enough. But then after that, I think I just yelled at my student. I was like, what are you doing? I was like in like awkwardly like in the water halfway. Yeah. And so I'm not necessarily embarrassed about throwing myself out or accidentally hitting my student with the paddle. But like the combination of that plus being angry in that moment was like, oh, I could have handled that so much better and just been like, okay, friend, we want our boat to float together. This is not going to work. So yeah, good times. I think what I learned from that, though, I guess this is the point, is that yeah, even in the moment, well, and I guess the longer story is this was probably early on in our expedition because students then get better at loading boats and not accidentally dumping people out. What I learned was the actual personal forgiving power of students when you make mistakes or people you work with. And to me, this is a student relationship, but I can imagine the same in like a boss direct report relationship, right? That there's a huge capacity for forgiveness and acceptance after doing something. I got thrown out, whacked them with a paddle, and then yelled at them. But then later, I think like we did work together more. And I think our relationship was like fine, sustainable. We, were still connected and we still formed a good team. And I think that is attributed to the power of the student in this situation, my teammates' ability to like forgive and like let things go and or accept, yeah, you were in a really weird spot there and it's not your fault that you hit me with the paddle or that I don't know if we actually didn't have this conversation directly, but I think he could have said like, yeah, I probably would have yelled at you too. If our positions were switched, I would have been like, what the heck, dude? Like, come on. Yeah. Like the bigger lesson was the power of forgiveness is real.
That's good stuff. Who is someone that's helped you or supported you in your career? What did they do? And let's thank them by name, if they would be cool with it.
Oh, I think they would. I would love to talk about Jasper Hunt. He was my graduate school advisor and the chair of the Minnesota State Mankato Experiential Education Department when I was there. He was the boss of that. And he was my graduate school advisor. And I think one of the things that he actually did to help and support my career, I've kept in touch with him for many years, was while I was there, I had a graduate assistantship, and he basically made me in charge of the challenge course on campus as my assistantship. It sort of was what the job was, but in ways that I think were more subtle. He supported me in being like a leader for that piece of the program and the school. And I was like, we need to do this or that. And he would not always agree with me for sure, but often would agree or say, yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, let's make that happen. Yeah, let's do that thing. Oh, this is a great plan. If I would ask a question, why do we do it this way? Can we do it that way? he would either have answers or support my leadership in that. So Jasper Hunt, someone who supported my career development as a leader myself, but also facilitated me understanding leadership development, like sort of many levels as a professor and advisor, but gave me this opportunity to lead a piece of a program that at the time, I was a young graduate student then. It was a big responsibility, but he let me take it on and supported me doing it.
That's great. So what is a question you haven't been asked but are burning to answer?
We're going to play this Jeopardy style, right? The answer is that everyone can grow and change as a leader, and everyone has influence on the people and space around them, and to use it well. And I guess the question is, who even is a leader? Why should I care about leadership at all? No matter where you are or what you do, you have influence, impact on the people around you. And doing that with emotional intelligence and doing it well literally makes the world, this bubble around you, but the greater world, a better place. So it's worth it.
Good stuff. Good stuff. I'm going to skip the question that I wrote about favorite books. We've already talked about 3 different books.
Oh, yeah. I love books.
But feel free to mention your book podcast. So I know you're a big reader. So what's your podcast?
My podcast is called Books Applied, and it is usually a conversation with other people or myself alone if I'm really amped about a book and can't find a conversation partner, talking about a book, what's so great about it, and how to apply its ideas or use its ideas in your life and space around you. Often skewed toward leadership, but really not always. It's a whole gamut of things that I read and talk with people about.
I love people that read. Leaders are readers, and we can geek out about books another time. Final thoughts, and where can people find you?
Final thoughts, I guess. It's been great talking with you today. I feel like I've had a lot to say, so I look forward to listening to it later in a concise, edited form. Final thoughts, just that the small actions you do can often have a huge impact, and it's okay to be conscious and intentional about those small actions, and there are huge impacts that come later. People can find me at wslleadership.com or email me directly, iggy@wslleadership.com. I love connecting with folks around leadership, emotional intelligence. I have courses, webinars, workshops. Things are always bubbling up, so you can find all of that there.
Any social media presence that you want to mention?
Oh, I'm on LinkedIn because that's where you have to be for leadership life, but also Instagram, Facebook. Like, I'm on the places. I don't spend a lot of my life and times there. So if you want something from me, just email me. We'll talk. It'll be great.
All right. Oh, man. I've had a lot of fun today, Iggy. My guest today has been Iggy Perillo of WSL Leadership. Yeah, I don't have anything clever to say. We're
done.
We're done.
Thanks, Mark. It's been great.
Life is way too short for work to suck. So if you want help to build your team, train your team, or manage your team, we're here. Come see us at workplaysolutions.com. Thanks for listening to the podcast.